What's up, you beautiful bastards? Hope you're having a fantastic Friday. Welcome back to the DeFranco Show. And if you're new here on Fridays, we do things a little bit differently. Actually, since the move and initial setup to the new studio, we haven't been able to do this. But yes, we're finally back to 5 videos a week and very soon more. And on Fridays, what I like to try and do is cover stories I was trying to get to, couldn't for time previously in the week, cover more viewer-requested stories. And so with that said, let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is this young woman right here. A woman that 6 or 7 years ago, I would have probably made our lovely lady of the day, back in the clickbait days. And the reason I mention that old segment is it's kind of connected to the first reason she's in the news. And it's because she and many other attractive women went to the World Cup this year. They were photographed and then Getty Images posted World Cup 2018, the sexiest fan. Talk about a knockout round. Ugh. Oh, it's that last line that makes you feel like it was organized by your dad's creepy friend. But, you know, it was a collection of attractive women who had their photographs taken at the World Cup, which ended up getting removed, and Getty Images apologized for it. Writing, earlier we published a piece that did not meet our editorial standards. We regret the error and have removed the piece. There are many interesting stories to tell about the World Cup, and we acknowledge this was not one of them. And as you'd expect, in response to the removal and apology, you saw some people saying, good, you know, objectification that is beneath Getty Images. Others saying no, some have kind of jokingly called it sexy shaming. And my personal reaction to this is just, I personally find it funny, because I'm not of the mindset of I'm the person that would be offended by this. But it was weird with that title that it was posted by Getty Images. I would expect when I go to the Chive, that would be there. Which, by the way, shout out to the Chive, but it's not what you would expect from Getty Images. It makes about as much sense as like Jake Tapper doing a top 10 hot babes list. So there was that part of the story, but then the second story with this young woman, I think, is a real showcasing of what happens when suddenly you get the spotlight. Suddenly you get your 15 minutes of fame. So as we already know, her photos were taken, they were up on Getty, they start getting picked up. And at least one site features her as the prettiest Russian fan at the World Cup. And so more and more people start going to the site, other sites pick it up, more people are sharing the picture. Very quickly, she is identified as 28-year-old Natalia Nemchinova. And after that, as has now become a common occurrence, people started jumping into her past. And very quickly, we got articles from some places like The Sun saying Russia's hottest World Cup fan revealed to be a porn star after fans tracked down her X-rated movies. And it goes on to detail photos and video. But now, several days later, she has spoken out and said she is not a porn star. Reportedly saying, in fact, this is a very old story. I was in a relationship with a young man 5 years ago. When we broke up, he got back at me. He uploaded a home video to the internet, and that is how it began. I never worked as a porn actress. I never sold my body for cash. I was a model for some time, but that was my hobby, not a steady job. And so with that, this becomes a story that's actually about revenge porn. And as far as why people were saying that she was a porn star outside of the one video where she was having sex, it was because as far as modeling, she did nude modeling. There was kind of some solo videos. But yeah, there you go. That's the weird all over the place story. I don't know necessarily what the lesson is, other than the internet is crazy. And a question I want to pass off to you, what do you think it is about the internet and people in general where someone pops up and everyone goes into their past? Do you think it comes more from a place of people are genuinely interested in this person, they want to see more of this person, or is there this kind of perverse desire to tear people down? And so of course I am aware that then we're talking about what is the motivator, what is the intent, and so you start to try to put yourself in someone else's mind, which isn't always effective. But what's interesting to me is what you think their intent is. So let me know in those comments down below. And keep in mind, I'm not saying that's the case, I'm not actually even assuming that's the case. I just want to, one, point out that I am disconnected from the actual coverage of this story over there, and two, I know a lot of people that watch this show also want to kind of jump into this field, so just look at state laws. So yeah, link to that down below. Then we had Time Magazine announcing their 25 most influential people on the internet. This is their 4th annual roundup, and what's always kind of interesting with things like this is even though they're incredibly notable people, you will always find yourself going, who? And the list is unranked, and you'll notice that it kind of goes all over the place. For example, you have BTS, and then in that same list, you've got the women of hashtag Baba Eyako. It stands for hashtag I Am Woman, a hashtag that was started in response to President Duterte, because as Time explains, he's developed a reputation for rape jokes and sexist comments, and on May 20th, a few days after he stated that a woman should not be the next Chief Justice, people started this hashtag and movement. Then you jump to Logan and Jake Paul, then you've got Kanye West, and then it hops back over to Iman Al-Nafjan. She's been raising awareness and speaking out for women's rights in Saudi Arabia. And back in May, she and other human rights activists were detained and jailed for unspecified charges. She's been labeled a traitor by state media. She faces up to 20 years in prison, and she's just an incredibly important person, because I think when a lot of people thought of Saudi Arabia, they were like, oh, women can drive now. But what about all the people who have been outspoken for so long and were stepped on? And then finally, my kind of favorite back-to-back on this list. You got President Trump, and then right after, because the brand is strong, you got Desus and Mero. And others also know them as Daniel Baker and Joel Martinez, others the Bodega Boys, others the only reason they turn on Viceland. And actually, unfortunately for Viceland, that name is going the way of Puff Daddy since they are now going to Showtime. Which I know this story was initially about the 25 most influential people on the internet. But I'm very intrigued to see how Desus and Mero do on Showtime because it's obviously such a different audience. Will it be an example of fantastic creators and entertainers going to a place where there's a paywall and then they lose their audience? Or, because the brand is strong, you get kind of a Howard Stern effect. The people come with you, some newbies join along the way, and then you thrive. I've got my own personal feelings on it, but really only time can tell. But back to the main part of the story. If you want to see the full list, I'll link to it down below. It's pretty interesting. And actually, a question I want to pass off to you. If you could make a top 5 most influential people from the internet for you, who would your top 5 be? And you don't have to put them in any specific order. And then let's talk about the shooting that happened in Annapolis, Maryland yesterday. The shooting took place inside the Capital Gazette newspaper office. A person identifying themselves as an intern for the Capital Gazette wrote a tweet at 2:43 p.m. local time saying, "Active shooter 888 Bestgate, please help us." And Arundel County Police initially confirmed about 3:15 p.m. that there was an active shooter. Soon after, it was learned the police had one person in custody, but there wasn't really much information there. And we'll talk about the shooter in a little bit. And some of the first pieces of information to get out there came from Phil Davis. He's a crime reporter at the newspaper. Tweeting, "A single shooter shot multiple people at my office, some of whom are dead. Gunman shot through the glass door to the office and opened fire on multiple employees. Can't say much more and don't want to declare anyone dead, but it's bad. There's nothing more terrifying than hearing multiple people get shot while you're under your desk and then hear the gunman reload." And as more and more information has come out, here's what we've learned. According to officials, the police were able to corner the suspect within 2 minutes, but unfortunately not before the shooter was able to kill at least 5 people. Additionally, 2 other people with minor injuries were taken to a local hospital, but reportedly they did not suffer gunshot wounds. There are also reports of a 3rd person transported to the University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore, but no information has been provided on the victim's condition or injury as of right now. And since being arrested, the police were able to identify the shooter. There had initially been reports that the police were unable to because the shooter had mutilated their fingers. Law enforcement later commented that that was not true. And while they did identify the shooter, who turned out to be a 38-year-old man, Police Chief Timothy Altomer had this to say.
"I will not say his name today. I refuse to do it. I wish you wouldn't do it, but I know better. He doesn't deserve us to talk about him one more second."
And personally, I will say I commend Police Chief Altomer for having that stance. Unfortunately, many places did not share that sentiment, and we've seen his name and face plastered all over the place. And I mention that because if you're not familiar with my show, I try not to name and show the pictures of mass murderers. I personally think that it gives them what they want, and I think it incentivizes and inspires other monsters. Now, as far as the weapon used, according to officials, the suspect used a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun that he had legally purchased a year ago. And after a search of the suspect's house, officials have said they found evidence of planning, but have not found a manifesto. Which then brings us to motive, which has been a massive topic because it wasn't just a mass shooting, it was a mass shooting at a newspaper. And that's something I'll touch on after we get through the facts of this story. But as far as the motive behind this specific horrific act, it was reported that the shooter had a long-running vendetta against this specific newspaper. It was a 2011 article they put out with "The shooter's name wants to be your friend," and it covered a criminal harassment charge against him. And it describes a situation where he's harassing this woman, telling her to kill herself. He emails her company, tries to get her fired. In 2012, he reportedly filed a defamation suit against the paper. And the main thing here is it works its way through the court until 2015, and that's when the state's second highest court ruled in favor of the newspaper. The judge dismissing the case, noting a fundamental failure to understand defamation law. Additionally, a look at the shooter's Twitter page also showed a long-standing grudge against the paper, and that account has now been deleted, but an analysis by NBC News revealed that the account named the Capital Gazette in 149 of 876 tweets. Also reportedly in May of 2013, threats were made online that were reported to police, and an officer was assigned to the case, but the Gazette did not want to press charges. According to Police Chief Timothy Altomer, they thought that this would only exacerbate the situation. And in today's coverage of this story, that's the last I want to talk about this disgusting monster who just murdered 5 people. And what I'd like to do from this point is first highlight the newspaper's reaction and the victims of this situation. We saw the paper publish individual articles on each of the victims that I'll link down below to. You had 61-year-old Gerald Fishman, a man who had been working at the Capitol since 1992, a man described as a perfect editorial writer. You had 59-year-old Rob Hyacin. He began at the Capitol in 2010 as an assistant editor. Before that, he was a staff reporter at the Baltimore Sun for 15 years. And in addition to being an incredibly dedicated journalist, he was known for being a mentor to other young journalists. 56-year-old John McNamara. He worked at the Capitol for over 20 years. People seeing him as the source for reporting on politics and community in that city. There was 34-year-old Rebecca Smith, who was recently hired as a sales assistant. She was described as a very thoughtful person, kind, considerate, willing to help when needed, and just had the biggest heart. And then finally, 65-year-old Wendy Winters, a mother of 4 who moved to Maryland 20 years ago when she started freelancing for the Capitol. But then her writing became so popular that later on they brought her on full-time. A woman who was just described as so connected to the community. And in fact, even her last tweet was a video from the Gazette about a community mural project. Those are the people that I would rather focus on, the people who had their lives taken because they were simply doing their job of informing people around them. And additionally, the survivors of this horrific attack, the other people who work at the Gazette. People like Chase Cook, who was a reporter for the Capital Gazette last night, tweeting, "I can tell you this, we are putting out a damn paper tomorrow." With the paper's official Twitter account tweeting, "Yes, we're putting out a damn paper tomorrow." And showing so much strength, they reported on their own tragedy. And in their opinions page, they simply put, "Today we are speechless. This page is intentionally left blank today to commemorate victims of Thursday shootings at our office." Then naming the victims, and adding, "Tomorrow this page will return to its steady purpose of offering our readers informed opinion about the world around them, that they might be better citizens." But then finally, something I feel that I need to address, because there are a lot of people playing the blame game right now. You have many people pointing to Sean Hannity, who seem to be trying to connect this to Maxine Waters.
And I'm not turning this into a gun debate. I know that's where the media will be in 30 seconds from now. That's not it. You know, as I've always said, I mean, honestly, I've been saying now for days that something horrible is going to happen because of the rhetoric. Really, Maxine, you want people to call your friends, get in their faces, and Obama said that too. Get in their faces. Call them out. Call your friends. You know, get protesters, follow them into restaurants and shopping malls and wherever else, she said.
What Hannity is referencing there, if you don't know, House Representative Maxine Waters has encouraged people to confront Trump officials in public. But it's also important to note that on that program he said,
and while it's not connected in any way, I'm not suggesting it's connected in any way, the incendiary rhetoric that we have been hearing and the calls to confront people in restaurants and at gas stations and department stores and the incidents that we have seen with Sarah Sanders and Secretary Nielsen and Pam Bondi, and, of course, the tweets threatening the president's son and threatening Secretary Nielsen and even the granddaughter of the president. Things are getting way, way too hot and out of control. Again, separate and apart from what happened here. And it's a little scary.
But also a note there, because Hannity has defended himself because he feels like he's being misrepresented, saying certain members of the media are creating a false narrative. In their defense, when listening to the show as it is uploaded to YouTube, you make your initial comments about 12 minutes into this video, and then you don't clarify that these are separate things until almost the 25-minute mark. So at the very least, it could still be considered a backpedal. Then we had people point to Milo Yiannopoulos. This because earlier in the week, the Daily Beast and the New York Observer quoted Milo, saying, "I can't wait for the vigilante squads to start gunning journalists down on sight." This was in a story from the New York Observer asking Milo for comment about a restaurant where he reportedly dines with what they called other right-wing figures, adding that that was his standard response to a request for comment. And according to the Daily Beast, he gave a very similar response when asked about his decision to join UKIP. And this story had actually blown up somewhat before the shooting. Milo defending the comment, saying, "Of course it was a troll. I've spent my entire career calling out people who use violence as a response to differing opinions. Nothing saddens me more. If journalists do start getting attacked, it will be thanks to disingenuous nonsense like this story." But then at the same time, you had people pointing out that on Instagram, a now deleted post from Milo's Instagram account had Milo's quote from the Daily Beast and a caption that said, "Where is the lie?" Some people saw that as continued trolling, whereas others saw it as a veiled threat. Eventually, Instagram ended up removing that post. Additionally, Milo defended himself after the shooting on Instagram and Facebook, saying, "The bodies are barely cold and left-wing journalists are already exploiting these deaths to score political points against me. It's disgusting." He then pushes the blame onto the reporters, adding, "If there turns out to be any dimension to this crime related to my private misreported remarks, the responsibility on that lies squarely and wholly with the Beast and the Observer for drumming up fake hysteria about a private joke, and with the verified liberals who pretended they thought I was serious. I made a private, offhand troll to two hostile reporters who breathlessly publicized it, and like vermin, their fellow journalists swarmed to remind the world how much they hate Milo." And also a thing that people have noted is that with his statements on Instagram specifically, he included these photos of him with a weapon. And then later in the day, we saw Milo post a text on Instagram. This seems to be a text he sent to Davis Richardson of The Observer, saying, "I'm suing you in The Observer. 233,000 tweets today accuse me of being responsible for 5 deaths. That's on you and your headline. I didn't want to spend the $3 million it would have taken to get Simon & Schuster to court, but you best fucking believe I am coming for you and I will take you to the cleaners for this. Your life is over." And then from this, lastly, we look at the White House and Donald Trump himself. We saw Press Secretary Sarah Sanders tweet, "Strongly condemn the evil act of senseless violence in Annapolis, Maryland. A violent attack on innocent journalists doing their job is an attack on every American. Our prayers with the victims and their friends and families." Additionally, this morning we saw Trump make a public comment.
"All Americans should be free from the fear of being violently attacked while doing their job."
But to this comment, a lot of people said that the president was being two-faced. Many people saying that Trump himself has stoked the flames of hate of the press. And I'm not talking about how you would see people showing up to his rallies with shirts like this. And in fact, it said that that shirt has existed for years, so it's not specific to this situation. Some people referring to his fake news tweets, some on the individual attacks on reporters, but also there have just been a number of events, specifically his rallies or at CPAC, where he refers to the press as the enemy. When Donald Trump is in front of a crowd, it's kind of, when he does that, it's him playing his greatest hits. And it's not like it was just campaign Trump. I mean, just a few days ago in South Carolina, he said this.
They interviewed 10 women on one of the opposing networks, the enemy of the people, I call them.
And so I mentioned these three moments of people kind of trying to attach blame, not necessarily even because I'm saying they're directly responsible for the shooting. That's not what I'm saying. It appears there was much more going on. The shooter at one point did tweet about Trump and the Gazette in the same tweet. But when you look at the situation as a whole, it seems like there was just much more happening. But I mention this because I think it is really a commentary on what our society is like right now. And people can try and just kind of scoff it off, throw it away and say, oh, it's just ridiculous leftists. Those libs always trying to blame Trump, which I think people could point to the Sean Hannitys of the world who then kind of clarify and or backpedal 12 minutes later. But it should really not come as a shock that people assume that there is some sort of connection because what we have seen over the past few years. And what I ask, whether you're kind of a longtime viewer or you're literally here to dislike the video and throw out some horrible stuff at me, just for a second, if I have your ear, just don't look at this as your guy, their guy, everyone fighting it out. The reason I personally believe it is not shocking that so many people assumed that there was a connection, whether it be to the Milo, the Trumps, the whoever of the world, is that for the past few years, we have seen the normalization of hatred and villainization of the media, of journalists. When part of your rally shtick is to refer to those who do not give you complimentary coverage as the enemy, a hostile. When we live in a time where journalists on the left and the right regularly get death threats, it's not ridiculous to call out a fuckboy like Milo Yiannopoulos for being a disgusting douchebag with what he's saying. Especially, let's say, if you play the game of changing the target of his troll, right? Instead of journalists, he had said Republicans and Trump. What would your reaction have been if he said that 2 days prior to Scalise and those Republicans being shot on a baseball field? Words have a very real impact on the world and people around us, and sometimes we don't see them for a very long time, and so it's very easy to not acknowledge their power. And what I'm hoping is that from this horrific thing that happened in Annapolis, Maryland, that secondarily, it's a wake-up call not only that we should be appreciating the people who are dedicating their lives to trying to get information to us, but we realize that the way that we have discourse in this country needs to be a certain way, because next time it may be more directly connected. And I say that full well knowing that I have an audience that there are people that think this environment, this is 100% connected to things like this, whereas others think it is completely disconnected. What I am saying is that moving forward, if we can agree on one thing, the words that we use matter, and we should take that into account. But that's where I'm going to end this one, and obviously this is the Philip DeFranco show, whether it's this story, the first one, anything in between. I'd love to know your thoughts. But yeah, that's where I'm going to end this one. I don't know if the last bit was futile, but it was just kind of one of those things I just need to throw out there. And that's where I'm going to end today's show. And remember, this is the Philip DeFranco show. It is not just a show, it is a conversation. So whether it's the last story, the first one, anything in between, let me know what you're thinking in those comments down below. Also remember, if you like this video, you like more videos, hit that like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications. Also, if you missed either of the last two Philip DeFranco shows you want to catch up, you can click right there. But that's it, of course. As always, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you Monday. Almost said tomorrow. I was almost a liar. Have a good weekend.